Shattered to unbreakable. Listen here, sweet sister. Whether you think you have one little crack or you are shattered into a billion pieces, this podcast is going to give you the resources, tools, and skills to help piece yourself back together to form a beautiful, unique, solid, and unbreakable masterpiece. You are listening to Shattered to Unbreakable, the Reclaim Podcast. Let's talk. Okay, welcome everybody to another episode of Shattered to Unbreakable. My name is Brandy. I am your host, and I have a very special guest with me today. So I went through a pretty hard journey of self-development and a very low, and getting to this confident self took a lot of work. And the guest I have with me today is the person that facilitated that healing journey. So thank you, Rachel Hayes, for joining me today.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me on or asking me to be on.
Absolutely. So Rachel is a licensed therapist, and when I was searching for somebody, she was the perfect person. So we started with talk therapy. We tried some EMDR, worked beautifully to erase some of the really terrible memories that I had. And then we tried brain spotting at the end of it, and that totally transformed my world as far as anxiety and emotional stability. So I'm having her on today because we're talking about emotional protection. We're in the WOR-rior Series, talking about how to protect yourself. So I was talking to Rachel a little bit about what does it mean to be emotionally protected or to protect yourself emotionally. And she was talking about how it actually means a lot of things, including physical protection, all kinds of things. So she's going to talk to us today about what kinds of steps you can do or take to be emotionally protecting yourself throughout life. So take it away, Rachel. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, thanks. I think, like I said before, I think it is a lot of things. However, even when I was hearing you talk about it right now, what comes up for me is I think about the brain spotting in particular, and some of the questions that I ask people around emotions to be able to identify emotions. Some people can't. They say, I'm fine, which I think I've told you before, and you can bleep me out if you want to, but fine means fucked up, insane, neurotic, and emotional. So you probably are fine, right? Probably fine.
I love it.
And I usually, even in my group that I facilitate, I give people a emotional wheel, and every day when we check in for group, I ask them to identify the emotions on the wheel that they feel. And fine is not on there, tired is not on there. That's not the emotions we're looking to connect to. And so I was thinking about this, and I really feel like until someone can really honestly answer that question, identify what emotions are coming up for them, how in the world could they think about protecting that or protecting themselves emotionally? I just don't think it's possible. And I think that's where you felt, I don't think you mind if I share, but I think that's where you felt the most healing, is being able to identify these emotions that you're struggling with, that what your partner was saying that you were feeling was not true or accurate about how you actually feel. And then also being able to identify where, if I close my eyes, where am I feeling that most in my body? Because it's very important. Your body stores everything. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and I mean, it literally stores your traumas, it stores your emotions, and all these things. But again, at the end of the day, a lot of people will just say, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm just tired, or whatever easier answer it is to say. So I think until they can identify and be honest with themselves, then how could you ever think about protecting yourself? It's like that one thing people always say, like, how I need to learn how to love myself before I can learn how to love anybody else. It reminds me of that. So
absolutely. Yeah, I remember when you started asking me where do I feel it in my body, that was a brand new thing. I had never experienced that before, like trying to see if I'm feeling an emotion in my body physically. And some of the ways I would feel it as like a heaviness or a tightness in my chest, or as I was going through the brain spotting appointment, it was like tingling in certain areas, or something would get really cold or really hot, or I would feel a release or a lightness happening. So it's important to pay attention. Now I can identify that in my body, like, oh, where is this pain coming from? Is it really a pain? Because what's interesting about pain is your brain tells you when you're hurting. You don't actually have to be in danger or being hurt for your brain to think that you're hurting, which is interesting.
Yeah, and actually, my group this week too was, we were working on shame and vulnerability. And one of the things that came up was around humiliation, which we watched the TED Talk from Monica Lewinsky, which if you've never seen it, you should watch it because it's really good. But she says in it that another person, I can't remember who it is, but someone else she researched said that humiliation is actually the most intense feeling over happiness and anger.
Wow.
And the strongest words for that are me too. So when you hear someone else's story and vulnerability and sharing with you, that recognition of, oh my gosh, I've been through that too. There's like a Me Too movement that happens.
Oh, I just got chill bumps.
So really, yeah, so really connecting to these emotions are so strong, and like what they can lead to if we don't communicate. That was the other part of, I think, what I was talking to you before this around emotions, is the other part of that is communication is so important, to be able to say, hey Brandy, when you said this, what it brought up for me, what emotions came up for me with this, and about that I feel this. Because we don't normally talk to each other that way. We should,
right,
but we don't. And a lot of times what ends up happening is people, and you know because of the work that we did together, but we just sweep things under the rug,
yeah,
and we're fine. We go about our day. We don't communicate.
Yeah, and then it comes up later in an explosion, and nobody knows why, including yourself sometimes, why you're exploding. But it's because you've just kept sweeping it under a rug, and it's building and building and building.
Yeah, and I call that coming out sideways. So like, eventually, when you just keep sweeping things under the rug, you don't really know what you're doing, but eventually it's going to come out sideways somewhere. And even when I took my licensure test, there's like a really stupid question on my therapist test, but it says like something about the man that comes home from work and he can't hit his boss, even though he's angry at work. He can't hit his boss, so he comes home and he kicks the dog or he smacks his wife because it comes out sideways. He has nowhere else to put it, and then that's what happens when he gets home. And so eventually someone will trigger something in you, remind you of an experience that you had with somebody else, if you don't deal with these emotions and issues as they come. And so it can just become, like you're saying, a very overwhelming thing if you allow it to be such thing.
Right. So if you were to give people like, here's 2 or 3 things that you can try to start stair-stepping your way to emotional protection, what would like a couple of things be that are just like, yes, you need to start here?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think one of the parts of it is communication. So really being able to communicate whatever it is that comes up for you around emotions, your wants, your needs, not making excuses for things or people. And then the other thing is you can definitely practice. So the other thing is that you can really practice some of these things on your own. Like if you go to YouTube or Spotify and look up brainspotting music, there's a lot of it on there, and David Grand is the creator of brainspotting. So you can use his music too that's on there. But you're just going to connect. You can do it one of 2 ways to learn to connect to your emotions and then protection as you see it. You can either close your eyes while you're listening to the music. It creates bilateral stimulation that activates both sides of your brain. So you close your eyes and then just connect to your body. Do a body scan from head to toe. And ask yourself, where in my body do I feel most grounded, neutral, or calm? And maybe it's just your pinky finger. That's just a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to work on expansion while you're listening to that music, just imagining that it's getting fuller and maybe in other places in your body, and just see what you can connect to. The other thing is you can look in your space, in your room, because that's how brain spotting works, with your eyes open. And you can look at different points in your room, and you're going to ask yourself those same questions. You say, like, when I'm looking in my room, you're going to connect to different things in your brain, whether you know it or not. Where do I feel most grounded, neutral, or calm? And practice deep breathing and connecting, and just noticing the thoughts that come up for you, and trying to focus on, like, I have my clients focus on positive affirmations, especially because most people don't believe them about themselves, and getting to a point where they do believe that. And then that causes expansion of your brain in order to work on these things, emotional regulation being one of them. Positive affirmations and how you see yourself is another.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, so I know that you have to go, so thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to talk more about what you just talked about, because I think I understand where you're going with the brain spotting part of it, obviously, because I got to train, so that's great. But yes, I love the communication too, the way that you said it. When you said this is what it brought up for me, and I feel blank about it. I think that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So that's, even if it's just one takeaway from this episode. Yeah, for real, it really is. And I love communicating has been one of the best, attributes, or I don't know, assets to my current relationship that I'm in. It's so healthy because we communicate so well, even when we're upset, and not once have we had to yell or get upset with each other in any sort of way other than just a calm conversation, which is mind-blowing to me. But through what you've taught me, I've been able to communicate better. Yeah. Well, thanks, Rachel. Good. I'll let you go. And yeah, absolutely. I love you. You're the best. Thanks for coming on. And if you guys need counseling, talk therapy, EMDR, brain spotting, go to Rachel. She's amazing. And tell them your website so they know where to go.
It should be R as in Rachel Hayes. Well, RH, so Rachel Hayes. RH Counseling and Aromatherapy at, well, my email's at gmail.com. I don't know why I said that, but the website is the same. You can basically just look up Rachel Hayes in Wellington, Colorado, and I'm pretty sure you'll find me in like 2 seconds. So.
Okay, perfect. And we'll put all that information in the show notes too. Okay, so we're going to go to a quick break, and when we come back, we're just going to recap and highlight what Rachel said, and elaborate a little bit on the brain spotting in your own room that she was talking about, because that is pretty awesome. So we will be right back after these words from our sponsors.
If you're like me, you are starting to notice some fine lines and wrinkles, maybe a few age spots, sunspots, pigment differences, and maybe some spots on yourself you don't really want to be that hairy. I would love for you to check out Crystal Vision's Med Spa in Loveland. They help with high-powered technical lasers to remove hair, help with rosacea. They do acne treatments, tattoo removals. They have micro needling, body sculpting, and they also specialize in Reiki. At Crystal Vision's Med Spa, they are committed to quality. They utilize the state-of-the-art laser technology to offer you high-quality services and results. Whether you're seeking treatment for your skin or body, they're committed to assisting you with state-of-the-art technologies and high-quality personal service to help you achieve your goals. Your one-stop shop for beauty and anti-aging services is Crystal Vision's Med Spa in Loveland.
And we're back. I wanted to just quickly highlight a couple of things that Rachel had mentioned, and Aubrey's going to chime in whenever she stops laughing, because on the breaks, I just mess everything up on the breaks, which is fine. But Aubrey's crying; she's laughing so hard. So she was talking about the way we communicate, which I think that was pretty clearly indicated that when you're feeling something, you have to speak up. And I know that sometimes we're scared to. And if you're in an abusive relationship, please, that's not what she's talking about. Yeah. You cannot communicate to toxic people in a normal way. So if you are trying to communicate with narcissistic or toxic people, go back and listen to some of our podcasts regarding narcissism and how to deal with that. I think one of them was navigating narcissism. That's a really good one. And then there's how to deal with toxic people. That's another good one. It's not called that. It's something else.
It's called Toxic World.
Toxic World. Okay. But we're talking regular relationships, normal, healthy relationships. When you are sweeping things under the rug because you don't want to upset somebody, it's going to come out later. And I love the analogy that Rachel used where if you're sweeping something under the rug, there's 4 sides to every rug. Once it gets full and there's nothing else to sweep, it's just going to spill out the back and the sides. So you can't ever just completely sweep it under the rug and just keep doing that. So in order to prevent it from bubbling over and just spewing out for everyone to see, you're going to need to communicate these things. So if it's a boss, you need to find a healthy way to say, hey, when you said this or when you did this, this is what came up for me. And I feel anxious when that happens, or I feel frustrated when that happens. I feel embarrassed when that happens. I feel inadequate when that happens. I feel, all the feelings. You can look up emotion wheel too on Google and just see what all is up there. I love looking at that wheel because sometimes I'm like, I don't know how I'm feeling right now. And I look at that wheel and I'm like, oh, I'm just frustrated. I'm feeling frustrated, feeling scared, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling lonely. There's so many different feelings, and if you can pinpoint it, and then like Rachel said, one of my favorite exercises she had me do was to close my eyes and think, okay, where in my body? Like when I think the words, I am lonely, and I close my eyes and I think where in my body am I feeling this? And it's going to feel weird at first, but even if you just feel like, okay, I feel like my lower back feels tight right now. And then you kind of connect that emotion with that lower back feeling. And there's something that happens when you bring your body and your brain together. And she was talking about, it's called bilateral music. So if you go on and look up brainspotting music or bilateral music, and put on some headphones. It only works with headphones. So if you try to do it just on your laptop or something, it's not going to quite give you the effect in your music in the other ear, and it'll go back and forth. Like she said, it activates both sides of your brain, the emotional and the logical. That way you can think through these things with a balanced mindset, and then you can also notice in your body where you're feeling it. And it's not like you have to do anything about it when you feel it in your body, but just something about the word noticing.
Yeah.
You're noticing this. And so it just brings it all together.
Go
ahead.
So I was thinking earlier today, I've been having a weird day, like I told you before. But I was thinking about, my husband is great. He works really hard for our family, but I've just been irritated all day. So I was thinking about, I know you haven't done anything wrong. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm mad at you.
I feel angry.
So I chose to keep that emotion to myself. I'm going to process that individually because he didn't do anything. I feel like if I mention, I'm upset with you, he's going to be like, where is this coming from?
How? Why?
You know, so, yes, communicating in a healthy relationship is important, but I think identifying your emotion in that space like you're talking about is good to be like, this is my own stuff. I need to sit with this for a little bit and figure out what this is. Communicating it is probably just going to open up a whole can of worms because he didn't create the problem, so he doesn't need to help me fix the problem.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
That's a good point. So I'm thinking of this question our audience might be thinking of, well, when do you know when to communicate and when not to? So I would say, do you have a situation where you could say, hey, Clint, when you did this, it brought up this for me, and there really wasn't one of those that you could pinpoint. Yeah. That's a really good indicator that it's not them, it's you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if they didn't do anything, but you're just mad at them, that could be something going on in you and not them, or something going on with somebody else. Mm-hmm. Like she said, if your boss is irritating you and you come home and hit your wife.
Right.
What? That example was like, huh?
Yeah. Not acceptable.
No, but yeah, I get it. I do that with my poor kids, and I think they do that with me. If they're frustrated at school, they come home, and I'm the first person that's going to get there, battling punches. So,
and just for clarity, we're not talking about physical violence when we're talking about our kids, but we've all done that, right? Where like you get all worked up at work and then you come home and they're like, hey mom, what's for dinner? And you're like, I don't know.
Leave me alone.
Snap.
Yeah.
And they didn't do anything to deserve that.
Right.
But it's coming out sideways, like she said.
Yeah. So it could be somebody else. So what Aubrey could do in this situation is like think, has there been a situation that upset me lately that I didn't address, right? And see if there's something else you need to address somewhere else in your life. But I think like the moral of this whole episode is you own your emotions. They're yours. Sometimes they're not your fault, but it's your responsibility. I think we've said that before.
Yeah.
It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility to own your emotions and do something with them. So if somebody is doing something to hurt you emotionally or even physically, it's time to communicate how it's making you feel. If nobody's doing anything to you and you're feeling something, it's time to examine yourself. So Rachel gave us 2 tools. One, the emotional examination is more so to deal with your emotions, and then the communication is to deal with somebody else affecting your emotions. And then there's one last thing I wanted to point out, and that was the brain spotting at home. And so she's talking about finding a way to regulate your emotions. How are you going to regulate that? And some people were never taught to regulate emotions, and so they have no idea how to do this. So she's giving you a tool as just to sit in your room. Part of it is that bilateral music. You can do that, and like she said, think of somewhere in your body that feels most calm, grounded, and neutral, and then just notice where you're feeling that and see if you can expand it to more parts of your body. The other way is to just sit in your room. You can put that music on or you don't have to, but sit in your room and just start looking at different places in your room. Just look at the spot for 30 seconds or so, and then look at another spot, 30 seconds or so, look at another spot. Try to go along your field of vision. You can also go up or down. And if you notice a spot that you looked at that feels calm, you can look at that spot and just breathe and notice what you're feeling, notice what you're thinking, notice how your body feels, and just stay there. And then when you feel any of those emotions that are unsettling, you can go to that spot and look there and create that calmness in that space again.
So while you're doing this, are you trying to think about a certain situation or a certain emotion, or are you trying to go like white noise in your brain and just feel? You know what I'm asking?
That's a good question. Yes, a lot of people, as far as brain spotting goes, you're supposed to be open and curious and just let your mind go where it wants to go. So we kind of want to try to control our mind to think certain things. But when you're looking to emotionally regulate, she was talking about using affirmations, positive affirmations. So if you're feeling lonely, or like for instance, if you're still single and you wish that you had a relationship, and that's just really getting you overwhelmed with this loneliness feeling and this frustration and all of these things, then sitting in that spot and looking for a spot that feels calm, neutral, and grounded, you can start to say things like, I am lovable. And then just sit there with that sentence, looking at that calm spot and see what comes up. Notice what comes up when you're saying, I am lovable. How true does that feel, is what she was saying. She asks people, how true does this feel? In brain spotting, we use a scale of 1 to 7. Does that feel, I am lovable? And so if it feels like a 2 or a 3, your goal is to sit there and think of these affirmations to get it up to that 5, 6, 7 mark. So that's very technical. And I would say having a brain spotting practitioner guide you through that would be really nice if you can afford it, and that sounds like it's going to be helpful to you. But if not, sitting in your room looking at that calm, grounded spot saying, I am lovable, I am lovable, and then just, still staring at that spot, or when your eyes are closed and you have the music, just letting that, notice what happens in your body when you're saying that, I am lovable. I'm feeling tingling in my fingers. And then your brain just might start wandering to all kinds of stuff. And then you just let that happen, because it's your brain trying to process what you're saying. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I would say try it and then email me with all the questions. Or Rachel, because she gave us her email. So Rachel's amazing. If you need a counselor, if you need a therapist, if you need EMDR, talk therapy, she is trained in so many different things. But something she specializes in and has had a lot of training in is narcissistic abuse and codependency and relationships and trauma. So if you're dealing with any of that, I highly recommend her. She is affordable, she is fabulous, and she's a no BS therapist. I love it. She didn't let me get away with anything.
Yeah.
She's like, no, you're not going there. And it was awesome because I was like, oh, okay. But it helped my healing journey go so much faster. And now I've been without therapy for almost a year and a half, and I feel so much healthier than I've ever felt as far as my mental strength and mindset goes.
Yeah.
And I've had bad days, but the cool thing about bad days when you're mentally healthy is they don't last very long. You have the tools to get through the bad days. You have the tools to see what you can learn from it. You have the tools to cope, emotionally regulate, notice what's going on in your body, communicate what you need to communicate. And this process feels so good when you're on the other side of it. So, yeah. I feel like that's a really good emotional protection episode. What do you think? Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I think really what it comes down to, and we've talked about it before and you've heard it everywhere, but it's boundaries.
Yes.
Right? You know, so it's simplistic, and some of you might be rolling your eyes right now, like, but in order to protect yourself emotionally, you have to have appropriate emotional boundaries. And so for me, what that looks like with some friends is that I can get super overwhelmed. I tend to struggle with anxiety. So, like, if I walk into a room and you immediately start going, hey, so this is what we're doing, and I need you to think about this, this, and that, and I'm like, no. No. Back up. So I have said to friends, like, excellent, 2 minutes. Stop right now.
Give me 2 minutes.
And I need 2 minutes.
Oh, that's so
just
good.
to be in this space. And I've had, it's beautiful because once I've set that boundary, I have some friends now that they're extroverts, right? Part of that might be that I'm an introvert. So they'll come in and just start extroverting everywhere. And I have a friend, it was great. I'm not referring to Brandy right
but
now.
I am, though.
I would tell you if I was. No,
I'm sensitive to Aubrey's needs now. I understand her.
No, but I have a friend, she walked into a room and she just started extroverting and telling me all the things that were happening that day, and I looked at her and she goes, I'm sorry, and she left the room. And then she came back. She was like, are you ready? And I was like, let's go. So,
those of you watching, Aubrey is doing this, extroverting all over the place, putting her hand out from side to side. It's so funny.
That's what it feels like to me, is they're just like,
they're spewing
they're trying
all the extrovert everywhere.
But it's like they're trying to love on people. Like, that's what I feel like you're doing, is like you're trying to invite me into your world, and I'm like, I'm not ready. I'll put my toes in a minute. I'm not ready to get in with you right now.
The water's too cold. Hold on.
Give me just a minute. But that's what I need. But it took a fairly uncomfortable conversation. And I had to, like, remove myself and get calm and regulate, and then later explain to her what was happening and what I was feeling, so the communication piece. And then, and now she understands me better, and we're able to have much easier communication.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And Rachel was mentioning at the end, before she left, it's boundaries. It's setting boundaries in so many different ways. And I think an example of it being a boundary is something as simple as, like, one of my pet peeves is if somebody is telling you the truth but joking. Yeah. Hate that. And I used to do it, which is funny. And I think I might sometimes still do it if I've had a couple beers. But I think if people are telling you something that's hurtful and then you say, hey, and they're like, oh, I was just kidding, lighten up. That hurts, I think, a lot. For somebody to say something hurtful, I try to set a boundary, and then they make me feel silly for setting the boundary. And that's not okay. My boundary is my boundary, and it's not silly. And if you're going to joke like that, to me, it doesn't seem like joking, and that's where I can say, hey,
I understand that you think you're just joking, but when you do stuff like that, when you say things like that just joking, what comes up for me is embarrassment. I feel like you're calling me out in public in front of everybody, and it makes me feel embarrassed. And I'm fearful of what other people are thinking. And then you can see what they say, and if they're still making fun of you and saying that your boundaries are stupid, see you later, bro. I don't want to hang out with you anymore. You know, and that's hard when it's family members, when it's your significant other, and they're really not listening to you. Could probably keep communicating that each time. But if it's happening somewhere where you can't, like, I guess if it's happening with somebody in your life that you can't get out of your life at the moment, you can leave the room, you can change the subject, you can, if it's at a restaurant, you can leave the table and go sit at the bar and have an appetizer or something. You might have to take some pretty drastic boundary setting action to get people to listen to you, and if they don't listen to you, then you have to think of some other things that are a little more drastic than that even. So yeah, it's a tricky thing, and nobody says it's easy. We're not saying like, oh, all you gotta do is set some boundaries. No, there's a reason why nobody sets them. It is hard, and people are gonna call you all sorts of names. And I think we've said this a million times before, but yeah, it's not easy. Protecting yourself is not easy in any form, spiritually, emotionally, physically. It's just not easy. Yeah. But your road to healing and happiness is to set them and be firm and enforce them. So that's why this is the WOR-rior Series, because you're a warrior and it's a fight, and you got this.
Perfect.
All right, that's a good place to end. We love you guys. Come back next week for another episode of the WOR-rior Series. See you then. I am so glad we got to connect on this podcast. It's been an honor, and I wanted to give you some more resources. We have a website called reclaimjournal.com where you can look at more skills and tools, including coaching sessions, brain spotting sessions, and the Reclaim Journal. These podcasts are free to listen to, but they're not free to make. So we will be having some ads. However, we do have an ad-free option. So if you would like to subscribe, not only will you get ad-free podcasts, but you'll also get bonus content episodes. We'll see you next week.